Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Tavis Smiley. Tonight, first a conversation about healthy living strategies for communities of color with Robert Ferguson, CEO of Diet Free Life. Robert Ferguson is the CEO of the health outreach company Diet Free Life and serves on the Presidential Task Force on Obesity for the National Medical Association. The certified nutritionist and fitness expert has focused much of his work on developing healthy living strategies for communities of color, specifically in finding ways to make healthy choices more accessible to underserved groups. Robert, thank you for your work, and good to have you on this program.
It's great to be here.
Let me start with the obvious question, which I don't ask out of any naivete, but why is this issue so much more acute and so much more difficult to tackle in communities of color?
The first thing that comes to mind is that the people who are making the decisions as far as how we're going to help those people who are in need, there's a disconnect. And the disconnect is cultural. So the foods that they're bringing to the table aren't foods that people identify with. And so they're speaking to them in a way where people can't embrace it. And as a result of not being able to embrace it, everyone goes back to their normal jobs and go back and do what they're going to do. And the people who we want to help don't get helped.
For those persons who don't understand what those language and food barriers are, give me an example.
Okay. For instance, we have, as you know, quite a few people who are going to food banks and they're getting that type of assistance. So if you're getting boxed cheese and top ramen and canned beans, how do you make that work when the people telling you how to become healthier, that dialogue is all about wild salmon, asparagus. And so the recommendations they're giving aren't recommendations that meet people where they are. And so a big part of our work is showing people how to make the most of their situations. So whether it's working and building what we call fat-burning meals with those types of foods, or showing people how to make the most of going to a fast food restaurant. Instead of demonizing the restaurants, we show people how to make it work no matter what their situation.
Ought they, I'm not calling names here, you're working with what you have, you're playing the hand you've been dealt. If you live in a community where you only have fast food choices, and I hear your point, you want to help people make the best choices that they can with these fast food outlets without demonizing the fast food outlet. But should these fast food outlets be demonized?
No, because there's a lot of laws in place so that when the foods do come to the table, as far as whether it's the Golden Arches or any of these fast food restaurants, they're not just making up things or just putting information out there or making food available to people that isn't fit for consumption. So giving them a little bit more credit for what it's worth, the goal is to show people how to make the most of those foods. And unfortunately, the big companies, the big fast food restaurants, they're having a tough time bringing clarity to the fact that we're not giving people food that we believe is going to kill them. We're giving people food that, you know, is part of our business, and it's food that we believe that they can consume and not hinder their health. See, to me, it's all about how much food are you eating of certain foods that cause the problems. You know, if I ate a Big Mac by itself, that's a fat-burning meal. But if I ate the Big Mac with the fries and the large soda and the cookies on the side, then I'm setting myself up for some problems.
So long as people, though, don't have the best choices in certain communities, they're always going to be like behind the eight ball, it seems to me.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Because if you went into like some of these restaurants, like McDonald's for instance, they have Newman's own salad dressing, organic. They have salads. They sell a ton of apples. So it's really just showing people how to make the most of those situations when they go to a fast food restaurant.
But if they're not going to fast food restaurants and they're going to supermarkets, I mean, this story is an old story, that they don't have access to fresh fruit, to fresh meat, to fresh vegetables. You got to drive miles away to get that. Now you got a transportation issue. So, you know, outside of the lane of doing the best you can with the fast food you have available to you, how do you survive?
Well, I mean, in this country that we live in, abundance is everywhere.
Right.
So we definitely aren't having a hard time getting access to food.
Right.
Now there are places in this country, because I've traveled to them, where they have major challenges with access.
Food deserts, they call them.
Major.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, you can do the best you can with helping those people, but now you're bringing in transportation. You're looking at how much money these people have. You're looking at their educational level. It makes it real challenging to be able to help these people. But for the most part, when I've gone to those areas that are food deserts, you can still get a banana, you can still get an apple, and you still have access to a lot of foods that people would categorize as healthy.
How much of this, though, is about food versus exercise and other healthy lifestyles?
I believe it's all important. You know, I believe in the three-legged stool mindset. So I believe that the way we think, what we think about, is a big part of it. I believe that nutrition is king, in the words of Jacqueline Lane, and I believe that exercise is queen. And I believe that becoming more active, getting people to move more, is helpful. But at the same time, we have this big disconnect, right? We have people saying to exercise a certain way, and that's a turnoff for a lot of people. You know, walking is the #1 form of exercise, like, done or preferred in America. However, from a psychosocial standpoint, you can't always walk in certain neighborhoods at 5 p.m., right? So, you know, meeting people where they are is showing them how to make it work based on their situations, and there's so many dynamics that makes it very difficult to do.
So if you can't walk at 5 p.m., to your point, then what do you do?
Well, then you work out inside.
Yeah.
You look at, there's community outreaches that are taking place where they have buses that go into neighborhoods. A lot of churches are doing things like this, and then they'll transport people out, give them an opportunity to learn about, like, healthier eating, to learn how to exercise, and to have access to ways to exercise.
You know, the part that's always difficult for me to swallow, no pun intended, is that losing weight, maintaining weight, is not easy to do in the first place. I mean, it takes dedication. Let's be honest about it. It takes dedication. God knows I know. It takes dedication. It takes discipline. It takes all of the above. And when you happen to live in certain communities and you have to work as you just laid out, you've got great ideas, but when you have to work that much harder to do something that's already hard to do anyway, I mean, realistically, it becomes difficult for people to wrap their brains around it. They got to work that much harder to do something that ain't easy in the first place.
Oh, it's tough.
Yeah.
It is tough. And it's like, it's almost like, you know, asking someone to go to the Vietnam War and they don't get to go to boot camp.
Yeah.
It's like we're throwing them into a situation where they can't win.
Right.
But they can, and I've seen it. And a lot of it goes back to mindset and having someone that they can anchor toward that can move them. And the flip side of that is that I think a lot of what we're doing is hurting the process. What I mean by that is when you have people, leaders, that get out in front and they talk about being more active and eating healthier, and they start to demonize certain foods, then people at home, I mean, that can really hurt them and cause them to spiral downward and to think that they could never be successful because they can't do what the leaders are doing. You know, they can't have access to the same things that, say, a celebrity has access to, like a personal trainer or a gym, and to be able to do the things that they're doing. And that can play a major role on hindering someone's mindset.
What do you see, to the extent that you do, where do you see us making progress on this issue? And I raise that only because whenever we have these conversations as part of our Road to Health segment on this program, whenever we have these conversations, particularly about obesity and about diet and all of that, the evidence is so damning that not a lot of progress is being made. And obviously, if there weren't hope, then you and others wouldn't be doing what you're doing. But, like, where do you see progress being made, though?
Well, you know what? Progress is made with getting the families involved. Like, there's a big project I'm doing in the state of Missouri. And in Missouri, we're going to reverse childhood obesity. And we're going to do it because we're going to the parents. We're not skirting around or going to the cafeterias. We're going to get the parents to adopt a healthier lifestyle and way of thinking. And as a result, their kids are going to become healthier. And the reason for that is that we know statistically that if one parent, or guardian, is overweight or obese, the kid is 40% more likely to be overweight or obese as an adult. But if both parents are overweight, we're looking at 80%.
So how do you get parental buy-in?
Give them the sizzle. Yeah. You got to make it fun, right? Yeah. Everybody wants to look great for the summer. You got to take that approach, get them in the tent, and once we get them in the tent, and they embrace it, and it's easy. There's no, they're not being demonized. Nothing's being demonized. They're being shown how to make the most of their situations. Then we have a win-win. You might have just answered this, but how and why in this country do you think childhood obesity specifically got so out of control? That's the big question, and I believe it has a lot to do with the challenges that we have as adults with our weight and our health. I believe it has a lot to do with transportation and lack thereof. I believe that kids are playing the video games more than You know, when you and I were a kid, we were out running around, staying outside as long as possible.
Yeah.
So I think it's so many things, and I think when you look at just one way of reversing the cause, you're probably not going to find it. You'll just chase the effects constantly.
Yeah. You think the country sees this as a cultural problem? And if they do, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think they see it as a cultural problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is that good or bad?
I think it's very. I mean, that's a challenging. That's a very challenging question,
Yeah.
and it's not real clear, because I think we're so multicultural that there's so many dynamics that come into play. I believe it has more to do with leadership than anything else, and a big part of that leadership is speaking and defining health in a way that most people can't access that type of health.
So what makes you hopeful about the work that you do?
Because I'm given a chance now to do the work.
Yeah.
You know, working with, you know, companies like Aetna, you know, and giving me access to opportunities to empower these families. Once we get, you know, some momentum there, and we demonstrate that with some clinical studies, then it's just a matter of scaling it out, you know, nationwide.
Yeah. Give me a better sense of what you're doing with Aetna specifically.
What we're doing is we're taking some underserved families and we're educating them. So I mean, I really believe that it's all about nutrition IQ.
Yeah.
I believe that, like, if you knew what I knew about nutrition, then you could look at certain foods and say, okay, he can go any restaurant he wants and he can build what I call a fat burning meal.
Right.
Because I can. So you can put me in a food desert.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where you put me, and I'm going to make it work because I know a little bit more than the average person. Well, the same things that I know, everybody can know.
So it's about the science.
Yes, it's the science. It's just really being aware, right? It's just having the knowledge and not feeling deprived or restricted. Because when someone feels like they can't have something or the answer is no, then we fight the grain.
Yeah.
We go against it. So we'll be very successful just because the parents are going to embrace it. And then we do what we tend to see our parents do, not so much what they tell us.
Yep. I'm wishing you all the best in it.
It's work, but we're doing it.
You're going to do it. Good to have you on. Robert Ferguson, CEO of Diet Free Life. Up next, Nurse Jackie Starr.